Welcome to the final webinar in the Fall MDE Accelerated Learning webinar series. My name is Melissa Nantis, and I'm with Michigan's MTSS Technical Assistance Center. We are pleased and honored to welcome a dynamic team from Muskegon Heights Public School Academy presenting on Accelerated Literacy Outcomes, Implementation and Action. I'm going to turn it over to the Muskegon Heights team.
Hi, good evening, or still afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Arnetta Thompson. I am the proud superintendent here at Muskegon Heights Public School Academy System. And I just want to thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share a piece of what we consider is our lives throughout the school year. We're going to put our presentation up and get started. So guaranteeing our legacy, our opportunity for accelerated learning outcomes and implementation in action. So I'm going to call your attention first to the left side of this slide. These are some symbols that we have adopted from West Africa. They are named Andikra symbols. And as you go through our presentation, and as you'll see on a lot of the literature that we have moving forward in this process, you'll see one of these symbols. But we feel that the meaning of each of these symbols actually corresponds really well with what we are trying to do in creating this legacy here at Muskegon Heights Public School Academy System. And this process started back in 2018. And it started because, excuse me, we noticed that our students weren't able to always see themselves in books, in literature, in curriculum. And so what started as a one-time summer project ended up growing into what we started calling our legacy curriculum that we're creating. But then we started using the term legacy to actually help guide us through the rest of the work that we do. So this Andikra symbol is a symbol of imperishability and endurance. Paola Freire says that revolutionary leaders, they need not think without the people, nor for the people, but only with the people. And so through this process of creating curriculum and how we operate and educate our students, we have really focused on this symbol and its meaning to help navigate us through this process. Our vision is to cultivate self-empowerment within our community and take informed action towards equity and social justice. And so I'll start here with how we involved the entire community in this process. We initially started out with a small group in central office trying to create a vision of how we were going to move forward with our legacy process. That group started with a Jamboard, and we just posted several different words that we thought were meaningful in creating a vision. So we just stuck them up there. Once we did that, we came back as a group, as a smaller subcommittee, and then we wordsmith how we put those words together to create something that was meaningful and drove the work that we did. And that took some time. We as the smaller committee, met a few times to go over the right size and to recite and redo and edit multiple times. And then we took it to a larger group. So not only central office, then we branched it out to our building leadership and then our district. And then we went to the community and parents, and they had input. We gave them what we felt was the vision, and we asked them, what do you think? Does this sound right? Is this something that you feel honors what you want your students to do and have in our school as we do this process? So this vision was truly created from the whole community of Muskegon Heights. So, as we do with most things, especially in presentations, we like to involve as many team members as possible. And as you see, there are multiple team members here. Myself, our assistant superintendent, our strategic plan partnership agreement coordinator. We have some teachers, special education director, and our ELA coach, not only within the district, but also one of our partners outside of the district. And we'll get into partners a little later. And although we just have this snippet of the group, it is truly a unified effort. We could have substituted any teacher, any principal, any other partner in this presentation because we've all walked the walk side by side. So we're honored, and each of these people will introduce themselves and what they do a little later. So again, that whole concept of partnering, we were vigilant about finding people that were like-minded, that were trying to accomplish the same types of goals we were when we started creating this curriculum and these processes to teach our children. And we reached out sometimes with cold calls to see who could help us, what kind of resources they could provide, who could they connect us with to get certain things. So we've been working with my MTSS, also with authors, Cultivating Genius, Dr. Goldie Muhammad. We have started a book study this summer with her work, and she has started with some professional development with our staff and district and families and community with this work in mind and how we're going to implement that throughout the curriculum to help our students really see who they are and embrace that in every subject area that we teach. The Museum of African American History, MDE, of course, our community partners with our legacy curriculum, parent advocacy committee. So parents from each of our schools come in and meet with us monthly to talk about various topics, not only the legacy curriculums, but what they see in the school, what they'd like to see in the school. We've also had a great relationship with the Carter Center out of, is it St. Louis? It's in Missouri. It's the University of Missouri. So Dr. King and his group have really been very helpful with helping our, especially secondary staff members, help create lesson plans and the whole process. They weekly, throughout the spring, met with our teachers to help in this process. Muskegon ISD, all these partners have joyfully lent assistance to help us in this journey. So we're happy to be here again, and we hope that you learn some valuable information through the process of us sharing our journey with you. And I will turn it over.
Thank you, Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson alluded to our timeline of how we got started, and I want to give a little nod to my MTSS because we kind of took one of their mantras on years ago: "Get started, then get better," and that is what we have always believed here in Muskegon Heights. So part of our literacy journey. Dr. Thompson mentioned a summer program that we started in the summer of 2018, and that's what we called Summer Reading Rocks, where we mailed books home to our children and families to build home libraries. And then from there, we started to build upon that work after we were awarded a Learning for Justice educator grant. And Learning for Justice, in case you're not familiar, it was formerly the Teaching Tolerance organization, and they have had a name change. So we were granted a modest but really inspiring grant for us to get started with what we have come to call our legacy curriculum. And that's the focus of our legacy curriculum, as Dr. Thompson mentioned in our vision. We really want to make sure that our curriculum is a mirror for our children and celebrates their identities. So that was really, it was a great start to this work for us. So that was October of 2019. And then throughout from that point on through July of 2020, we really did a lot of networking and learning. Dr. Thompson mentioned cold calls and the partners that we just saw on the previous slide. It took a minute to build relationships and even figure out who might be willing, able, have the time to support this work. And we had to do a lot of learning during that process as well. So then from there, we were able to build a leadership team in the summer of 2020. And that was a really great process where our team came together and we each kind of took different components of our curriculum work. And we just met weekly and we gave each other updates. And then we worked kind of with subcommittees throughout the interim weeks in between. And then we built onto that. In November of last year, we added our Legacy Curriculum Community Committee. And that's where members of our community joined us in the work to give us feedback, to help guide us. And so that program, or that committee, is still up and running this year. So we've continued it again. And then into January through March of 2021, this was one of the partners that Dr. Thompson mentioned. Angela Joy, who wrote Black as a Rainbow Color, was another cold call. We just reached out to her and we said, we want to send your book home to all of our families. Will you join us? And she just jumped in with both feet and was an amazing partner in that. And then spring of 2020, we got the awesome news that we were awarded the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, which it gets that big wow on top because we were already doing a lot of this work. But this really opened so many doors to us because it allows us to have the funding to put behind these dreams that we have for our children and our community as far as literacy is concerned. So from that, we just hit the ground running after we got that literacy grant. And we worked toward Black as a Rainbow Color. We built a mural with our children with a local artist that our community voted on. And then we started doing some legacy curriculum book clubs throughout the spring and into the summer of last year. Also in the spring of last year, we were able to forge a partnership with Dr. Goldie Muhammad, who we'll talk a little bit more about later in our presentation. And then over the summer of 2021, we built out a literacy expert plan with our goal being every teacher being a literacy expert. And then finally, we started implementing an enhanced literacy curriculum, which we'll also also talk more about this afternoon. And that launched this summer. And something that we have to note, COVID-19 pandemic struck all of us in March of 2020, and this work did not stop for us. We just had to keep focused and keep our vision at the forefront. So it is something to look back on when you see it all put out in a timeline like this. It's a lot to be proud of. And then you see at the end of that table there, we are not done yet. So we definitely have more to do. So part of our vision, from the vision and our work with Dr. Goldie Muhammad, we were able to build out some literacy goals, all built around Dr. Muhammad's historically responsive literacy framework. And you'll see some pieces that we have taken and we've kind of aligned much of our work to the components of the framework. And these are what Dr. Muhammad calls the literacy pursuits. So we had focus on identity through our home library collections and a book that we're using this year, similar to Angela Joy's Black as a Rainbow Color last year. We're going to be focusing on Kwame Alexander's Undefeated this year. We'll learn more about our skills that we're all building, both us adults as learners and our children as learners, and our work that Dr. Thompson mentioned around cultivating genius. So we are building our own intellectual capacity, and we are in progress toward the other pursuits of criticality, a call to action, and joy. So the next slide shows a little bit more about our literacy plan. And there's a lot here. You see a lot of check marks, but really the thing to focus on is the learning and dedication that all of our team members devoted over this past summer. You notice members of the team, they devoted 99 hours over last summer to all of this learning. Letters, online professional development, cultivating genius, and learning a new curriculum. And you'll learn a little bit more about each of those in just a minute. But really it speaks to the dedication and the commitment to all of our instructional staff members. And I just want to be really clear, when we say that, we're talking about our deans. We have all of our specials teachers, our electives teachers. Every single instructional staff member was part of this work to become a literacy expert. And Heidi's going to share a little bit more about our outcomes of our summer work.
Yes, hello, thank you, Jen. I am Heidi, I am the Special Education Director. And so our progress through the summer of 2021, all of those additional hours and dedication that our staff put into it, this is where we are standing at the end of the summer of 2021. 89% of our staff completed the Letters online course, which I'm super excited to dig into next with you all. Our reading mastery, which is our intervention reading curriculum training, we were able to get 96% of our staff trained in that this summer. And then our cultivating genius book response, independent reading and response, which was 16 hours, 70% of our staff completed over the summer. We're still continuing to do that work. So these are rolling percentages. That was data, one data point at the end of the summer. We've had the privilege of being able to hire several new staff that are just as passionate as we are about literacy. And so they are completing Letters Volume 1 right now. So on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit more. I will lead you through some of the supplemental curriculum we as adults went through in order to get ready to bring the science of literacy to our students, right? We are taking a letters course, and through all of this, we're learning that the human brain is hardwired for language, but it is not hardwired for reading, which was a little bit of a mind blow for a lot of us, I believe. And we'll talk a little bit more about that reading rope in just a minute, but it's based on the science of reading. So our next step that we did with letters was based on the science of reading. So we'll go to the next slide. And you've heard us say the word letters, which is actually not a word. It stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. And if you notice, one of the symbols that ground us in our work is also on this slide, because it's the symbol of knowledge, lifelong education, and the continued quest for knowledge, right? James Baldwin says the purpose of education is to create in a person the ability to look at the world for himself and to make his own decisions. And we, as a district, as a family, believe that learning is lifelong. So when we say that we all went through this Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling course, that we all became experts, and we all took this course together, all of us, from Dr. Thompson on down, took this letters training course. And so we'll dig into it just a little bit on the next slide. I have a little bit of a task for you to complete. So some of the things we went through during this course, and it was an independent learning course, we'll talk a minute about that, but just take a minute in your brains, in your own brains, to think about what you think best describes the activity of the reading brain in proficient readers compared to beginning readers. Is it A, that it's more consciously planned? Is it B, that it involves more different regions? Is it C, that it's more automatic? Or is it D, that it's about the same? I want you to think of your answer in your brain, and I'm going to tell you in 5 seconds of wait time that the answer is C. Okay, and it is more automatic, which stands for automaticity. And automaticity means it is the ability to read quickly and accurately without conscious effort. So that's just an example of one of the questions that we had to answer as we moved through this course, Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. And on the next slide, we have just a little touch of some of the diagrams and points that we learned. So the concept around Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling is that word recognition is a multiplication. Simple view of reading is that it's a multiplication problem. Okay, you have to have word recognition multiplied with language comprehension in order to get reading comprehension, and that it all stems from the brain. We talked about phonological awareness. We talked about orthography. So it's all simply about the science of reading and what goes on inside of the brain while we are reading, while we are learning to read, and it breaks it down. So volume 1, and this is how we learn. On the next slide, you'll see a little bit about how we did this. It's an online independent learning course. So it takes about 66 hours plus or minus. There's a book, there's a book that you use, then there's the online course where you watched videos and you learned a little bit more about it. And then you took quizzes and unit tests throughout the sections that you had to perform, that you had to score at an 80% or better. So some of the things that we did in the how we learned so that we could kind of share the experience, despite it being online and independent, is we created a Google Classroom where we would have announcements, tips, some shared materials. A few of us created some scope and sequences for people to follow. Some of us who are procrastinators completed a procrastinator's guide for how much time to spend. We created some shared study groups because even though it's an independent online course, we really did not want anyone to feel like they were alone in this learning. And then this fall, when we came back to school, we had weekly webinar classes on Wednesdays, depending on our grade level, so that we could share some learning together, which was helpful as well. On the next slide, back into some of the what we learned. So we're just giving you a little taste, a little teaser of this course. It talked about explicit instruction, the vowel valley, sound walls, Aries phrases, which is within its description of student characteristics and instructional goals and activities. Those types of things, if you know where a student is in Aries phases, you can then form your instruction and differentiation around it. It explained to us a little bit about orthography and explains it to us in a way that helped us better understand the how and the why of English spelling, which, as we all know, is not necessarily an easy task for our children or for us to complete. It gave hands-on practical ways to teach the skills that they were giving us as we learned. There were things like word practice routines. We graphed phonemes and graphings to kind of understand a little bit better what our students are going through when we learn to read, because as adults, for the most part, reading is automatic for us at this point. And I don't know about you all, but I can't remember how I learned to read. It was far too long ago. When we did a little bit more about syllabication. Some of the things that surprised us on the next slide, it really tied reading back to how the brain works, right? Someone somewhere, a bunch of scientists got together, figured out how the brain works, and then helped us use that knowledge to teach reading effectively. It gave us the why behind most words are spelled the way they are. Several teachers and a lot of us have thought before this course, it seemed like there was really no rhyme or reason around why certain words are spelled the way they're spelled. But this ties it back to the history of words. It ties it back to brain research. Another surprising moment, especially for me, was nonsense word fluency. And how it matters more than we realize, because it all goes back to making sure that reading becomes an automatic process for us. And then another insight that surprised us was that the historical layers of English can and should inform when we teach morpheme structures. There's so much more around the course itself, within the course, that surprised us. It's packed full of learning and understanding. It was a really, really good course to take. And on the next slide, we do have some advice, moving forward as a district. We did volume 1 in the summer, and we're going to be going into letters volume 2 here in a little while as well. But there was some debate within the district around, should you do the online work first, or should you do the book first, or should you do them together? A lot of teachers found doing the online work first and then reading the book was helpful. I think you have to find your own strength and way to do that. The nice thing about this is that it's a resource for information that you might need. So as you learn it and you absorb it, the book itself is full of strategies, full of ways to do things, and full of ways when you have a struggling reader in your class and you hear something that sounds familiar, it gives you one source to go back to look for strategies, because it takes the reading concept, but then it takes it further and gives you strategies for how to teach it. Practical, hands-on ways for you to teach that strategy if a student is having difficulty. One of the things that we thought about, there's a bridge to practice piece, which is wonderful, where you take what you've learned in a unit and then you go apply it to a group of students or to your class. Doing the work in the summer, it was a little bit more of a barrier to try and get those bridges to practice done with students. We were able to pair some summer tutoring, which was helpful, but it's definitely the biggest piece of advice was to use the bridge to practice effectively. You do need to have some access to students so that you can apply that learning immediately. Ms. Kurtz, did I forget anything as our resident expert?
No, I think the thing that I would add too is that the letters manual itself becomes a reference. And so these slides and some of the images and the learning come back to a resource that people are referring to. And as an ELA coach, I'm able to pull exercises that will help a student with this particular challenge, and help a teacher, refer a teacher to remember when we did this, and here's where that is, and that helps them better connect it with the student learning at the time. So that's a great aspect of what Letters offered as well.
And it really does, it does dig right into your long-term memory. So as you're in a classroom and you're listening to a student, you can remember it, you are able to see, break down words and move forward and then use that as a reference. It really, it's changed. I hear it in the hallways all the time. It's changed the way we talk about students as readers, and it's just delightful.
I think the other thing, while we're switching slides, the other thing that I would add to that is that working through the letters, like Heidi said, it changes the conversation, but it also is like the college level, grad level class. It's not a curriculum. It's the grad level class that informs how we teach and how we understand the curriculums that we're using. And I think that's a question a lot of people have asked when they hear about letters, be it the teachers or the staff or the parents. Well, when are we doing this curriculum? It's not the curriculum, it's the information piece. It's the coursework that informs what we're doing in the classroom.
Yes, thank you. And then as the what's next, right? So we are going to do Letters Volume 2, continue our learning so that we can continue to become experts in reading. And it'll be the same type of format. We'll have the online coursework, we'll have the textbook, a scope and a sequence, and then we'll have webinars together as groups so we can kind of discuss and do our bridge to practice by applying our learning to the classroom. And then the next step is going to be what the next group is going to explain to you with our reading mastery.
Hello, everybody. My name is Christine Kerr, and I am one of the ELA coaches for Muskegon Heights. We'll go ahead and introduce our group here, and then we'll dive into these slides.
I am Brenda Rybacki. I am one of the elementary teachers at Muskegon Heights.
My name is Jody Jurgens. I have the honor of partnering with Muskegon Heights through the Muskegon ISD as a literacy coach.
Yeah, and we are so excited to get to share with you our reading mastery, reading intervention that we have been implementing. And we feel that corresponds really well with the symbol of knowledge, lifelong education, and a continued quest for knowledge, that we want to get our students to build the skills that we need for reading and just, really take off towards that quest for knowledge. And not only that, but us as we've seen, okay, what do our students need? How can we support them? And how can we keep them moving forward? So as we go to the next slide here, we are using these two curriculums during our reading mastery intervention block based on the science of reading that Heidi just shared with you with letters. It's so neat to be able to connect our letters concepts with our curriculum that we're using. We have our reading mastery, which spans K-5, and we have a lot of groups that are doing the kindergarten and first levels. And then we also have this corrective reading program. And that corrective reading curriculum is used with our 3rd through 6th grade students, particularly. Brenda can probably speak a little bit more to what that one's like.
All right, so our corrective reading program, this is a decoding program where we work on several different components of it. The first one is sounds of the letters. It is letter combination sounds, and it is writing sentences with those sounds. The other part of the program that we work on with the corrective reading is we start reading stories and answering comprehension questions. The story is always broken down into 3 different parts, and after each part, you will ask 4 different comprehension questions. Most of our 3rd through 5th grade fall in anywhere from the reading mastery to the decoding B1 series. And we do have some that have gone into the other decoding B2 series. And right now, our main goal is to get them out of the B1 and get them into the B2, or to get them into the reading mastery part of it.
Great. So with our reading mastery and corrective reading curriculum, if we can move to the next slide. Both of those curriculums are what we would call, explicit instruction or direct instruction. So that's going to mean that there's a routine and lots of procedures and so within that, that's kind of based on that science of reading, that we want to make sure that our kiddos are getting what the things that they need to be able to make those connections in their brain and do well. So you can see on the side that we're asking children to crack a code. So in these programs, rather than asking them to guess out a word based on what the picture shows or what the word might look like, we're asking students to use their the decoding skills that we're developing with them to be able to read those words and figure out those words through the decoding or sounding out. So with that, you'll see there's a picture of some words like nose and old and rocks, and you'll see that those don't look like a traditional font. This is an example of the font that is utilized for our kindergarten and 1st grade students, that the program has developed this font to really help kiddos crack that code of reading. So for example, you can see that in nose, that silent E is smaller so that students are focusing on that sound. And you'll also see a sample lesson here that with that direct instruction, that both of reading mastery and corrective reading, our are scripted programs. And so the teachers are told what to say. They're given correction procedures that if students are not answering correctly, that they can get specific feedback to be able to make improvements. Students are given individualized opportunities to practice as well. And then there are also different things like fluency checks and mastery tests along the way that we can use as formative assessments or progress monitoring to be able to determine where our students are and how they're doing. As we move on to the next slide, you'll see kind of a breakdown of what our intervention programs kind of look like or what that process has been. So first, it started in our spring of 2021 during our remote learning. And we did some individual placement testing with students to determine what curriculum and what level in that curriculum would really be the best fit for them. So that was done by some amazing staff that worked one-on-one with students while they were remote to do those placements. Then when we came back in the fall, we were able to do a few more, in-person placement tests, get our new students placed so that they were ready for our intervention blocks. This intervention block takes place with all of our students in grades K through 6. So we have Edgewood Elementary, which is a K-1 building, and Martin Luther King Academy, which is a 2 through 6 building. And so both of those buildings have their own intervention block time in the morning, which is about an hour. Within that, we have 16 classrooms represented, and it's broken down into 32 small groups so that we're able to have most groups be at that ratio of 10 students to 1 adult, which really gives them that personalized custom reading instruction and allows them to really engage and participate. And as mentioned before, by Dr. Thompson, I believe, every adult here is a literacy teacher. And so it's super exciting as a coach to be able to walk the halls and see not only classroom teachers, but our deans of students and our specials teachers, our resource team helping with that. Also, we have instructional assistants and our grandparents from our United Way program. We have about 3 or 4 grandparents, I believe, that have offered to take groups. So they have some of the smaller groups, and the kids just love getting that one-on-one, really, individualized attention with those grandparents. So that has been really, really great. We even have, our coaches and administrators that are very involved and invested in our program as we've been going along. So we'll often see them volunteering or stepping in or leading groups as well.
So over the summer, we started launching some of these, and it was just a great chance for teachers and students to get into the routine before fall started. In summer school, we had a chance to bring the children back in the building. So this was an opportunity to get them back in. But some challenges that did come up for us at this point, as you can imagine, almost 18 months without them being in the building, getting these students to get a routine going, getting to patients that came in 40, and we were moving 104 about
Okay, it looks like Brenda's having some issues with internet. So I'm not sure if we should just move forward to some of the areas I plan to discuss, and hopefully she can come back. It looks like slide 28 is where I started my work. So if we could skip to that slide. All right. Just to sort of reintroduce myself really quick, I have had the honor to partner with Muskegon Heights through the Muskegon ISD. So this is my first year working with Muskegon Heights. It was my first time meeting teachers, meeting the students, and they have all of these huge, exciting, wonderful things going on. There was so much to take in, and very quickly. I know the start of the school year is crazy enough as it is. The training modules that they provided through the online portion of Reading Mastery were a great starting point. They have excellent videos where teachers were modeling the lessons in a small group setting. It really gave you a feel for what those intervention times were going to look like, especially at different grade levels as well. I was fortunate enough to be asked to step in and teach for a period of time. So for the last 12 or more days, I've had my own group for Reading Mastery, and it has expanded my knowledge around the program exponentially. It has given me the opportunity to look and see what is going well and where teachers may need some more support outside of just what we see when we're in observing. Things like getting to a certain point and, where do we go next for the assessment and where do we need to look for that? There were so many materials that were provided to teachers and I say so many because I was a part of helping Shelly and Christine get them sorted for every level, for every teacher, for every group. So it was a lot. And coming in without much experience with Reading Mastery, I had the opportunity to see all of the different pieces and how they worked, but for every level, it was a lot. So being able to teach my own K-level group and really get a feel for, okay, now where do I need to go to find that assessment, or when might those Black Line Masters be appropriate? It just really gave me a feel of how well-rounded this program is and how well it's built to support the teachers that are using it, but then also how we can help support them in finding those resources. And then I think moving into the next slide, I know Brenda, when we lost her, was just getting ready to talk about some of those challenges that she saw in the beginning. And I feel like I had a really unique experience because I was able to be a part of when Edgewood, the K1 building, started implementing their interventions. And then I was also there for the MLK implementation as well. So I saw it in two different buildings at two separate times. And I can definitely speak to those challenges. Getting those kiddos used to the transitions was huge, especially at K1, as you can imagine. But I was very impressed with how well they picked up on it. And it really just fell into place pretty quickly, even for the youngest students. Getting those routines and expectations laid out is definitely an area that I think we're still working to support. And it's a huge piece. It's a huge piece of that intervention time, because when you only have an hour with those students, you really want to be able to utilize that time as much as possible, and having that solid groundwork laid with expectations in the routine so they know what is next is huge. I can speak from the view of somebody who is teaching the program. There's a learning curve. There really is. Even with that script and this is what you say, it is so nice to start to feel like I'm at a point where I don't have to constantly check the book or check the screen or, what was I supposed to do for that correction? Because it's such a systematic program. that what works in one situation applies pretty easily to another as well. And you get in the flow. And I'm excited to see where teachers can go when we return from Thanksgiving break, now that they've had that opportunity to learn the program and get some of that verbiage under their belts. A huge, huge piece of this too, as I mentioned, being new to the district, I have had the opportunity to form relationships with students that I may have otherwise not met up till this point. I feel like that is a big part of this building-wide intervention as well. Those students are bonding and having the opportunity to form a trusted connection with an adult in the building outside of their classroom. So it's really helping to foster that community feel. And even in the short time that I've been doing it, I can tell you I love those kids with every piece of me. Like it's just wonderful to see them in the hallway and to get a big hug from them. So curriculum aside, that relationship piece of this building-wide intervention program has been amazing. It's huge. Looking ahead, we have had the opportunity to do some deeper diving into all of those materials that were provided. And I've also been exploring a lot of the online materials. Shelley and Christine may have had a chance to do a little more work with this, but I'm excited to see how we can really utilize all of the additional online materials that Reading Mastery has to offer and what that could look like for teachers in their classrooms, even outside of the Reading Mastery time. We are super excited because we've been doing a lot of assessments and collecting so much data to be able to look and see what kiddos are ready to move on and join a higher level group. And I can tell you just from today, I had a student just like flying through. I had to grab 3 of the presentation books because the growth that she made was just astounding. And it's really exciting to have the opportunity to see all of that in print, how much growth they made in such little time, especially when you consider that they are still getting used to routines and expectations, and teachers are still learning the program. And I am really looking forward to seeing where this program will take the district.
So we're going to jump back to the summer school and just review a couple things since Brenda had to leave us for that time. But I think that for summer school coming in and it being a new program, it goes back to what was mentioned earlier. Get started, then get better. And we've seen that take place, as Jody was talking about, now that we're into the fall program. But the summer program was teachers learning after just a little bit of training. So they had been trained in June, and in July, we were launching this program with students face-to-face. And so we had to figure out how to get students from that hadn't been in a school building and had never been in this school building, some of the little guys, to the correct places. And what does that look like, even just with the placement testing that was done over virtual learning in the spring? And some of those students needed to be tested still, and teachers were still learning that piece of the puzzle as well. And so, Christine, you can jump in at any time with that as well. But those learning routines and the curriculum pieces and the online access and resources were significant. And again, that direct instruction piece in ways made it easier. And yet at the same time, teachers like to teach, and we like to engage the students differently. And so that learning curve that Jody mentioned as well was a big part of that. I think we go to the next slide here. And Christine, if you want to mention some of those positives, and then I'll fill in a little bit.
Great. So some of the positive things, and a lot of these kind of come from that teacher perspective as well, is that the routine and the structure. And we can tell that our staff really appreciates that. So each lesson follows the same format, and then just, having students have that consistency is so great. I was talking to a teacher during a grade level team meeting the other day, and they said that, the first few days that we did this, it was really difficult to get a whole lesson done in a a day. But now, several weeks later, as students are comfortable in mastering the routines, they're saying, we're getting our lessons done in 30 to 35 minutes now that we're able to have that routine and those predictable procedures. Another thing that was noticed that students really adapted quickly to changing rooms. There was a lot of hesitancy at the beginning relating to our transitioning and, we're going to get all the students in the hall at once to all go to different classes, and people weren't quite sure how it was going to work. And as I'll talk later, there were some specific things we did to help, make those transitions easier for adults and students, and they really have thrived with it. And it took a lot less time than I thought for us to get those transitions down pat. And students are learning that quickly. They're learning hand signals quickly. They're really positive, and they're excited to go to reading mastery. That's something they look forward to. They have a lot of pride in getting to be able to walk down the hall, or our second graders that get to go up the stairs to another room. They just really like that, and it's been cool to see them really thriving in this. And even Brenda was going to mention that in 3 weeks of summer school, there's just been, even those small gains, we've seen those, impacting students. And even now, after just, a few weeks or a few months, depending on the school building, because we start at different times, there are, teachers even saying, I am seeing this growth. I'm seeing improvement already. And that has been so great to just start to see everybody thriving in this. It's been really wonderful. If we can go to the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about another experience that we got to have. I know, like as Jody was saying, it's been great to be able to experience teaching, even as coaches, just to be in that teacher position with the kids. It's really helped us to be hands-on and immersed in that curriculum. And that's another thing that a lot of teachers got to do this summer with some tutoring. So corrective reading and reading mastery were utilized in our summer school program, as Brenda mentioned. And also, teachers had that opportunity to do summer tutoring. So each teacher got assigned to maybe, 2 or 3 students to meet with weekly for, our goal was to have 12 sessions. So some people did 3 times a week, some did twice a week. It really kind of depended on the teacher working with the parents to figure out that schedule and what would really work best. And a lot of teachers chose to do that summer tutoring online. Personally, with the group that I had 1 student out of my group of 3 that was able to communicate with me about getting together to have a group. So we actually met at the public library. And so him and I and his adult got to sit and, kind of walk through this together. So we did a session each time that we met. We met for about half an hour. A few times a week. And that was really great for me to just get to experience the first grade curriculum and see what does it look like to do these word attack activities and get out the storybook and do those. And since it was just him and I, we also did the worksheet portion just so I could really get to experience what are those worksheets like? How do the directions in the book connect with the worksheets? Because there aren't worksheet directions printed there. They're oral directions that students get from the teacher's presentation book. And so it was really great to be able to have that experience. And he was just so excited. And I even see him around school and he'll, hey, you remember when we did this? Look, we're doing this now. And I'm at a farther level now. And it's great to just to see and share in that excitement. Now, to add a little bit more about our intervention blocks from the coaching perspective here, Shelley and Jody and I have all worked very hard to help make sure that everybody was feeling excited and confident and comfortable and ready to start, as this was a big undertaking, a new curriculum for teachers, and just something totally different than what's been done before, like with the transitioning. And so we've done a lot of things, as has been mentioned, like assessing students using those placement tests to figure out what group their students need to be. As teachers are getting more comfortable, some of them are noticing, man, there's some students, like Jody said, that are really making great gains. Can we have them reassess to see if there might be a place that's a better fit for them to help them to keep growing, while the students that are still at a different level in their group can keep working on that. So we've been doing those kinds of things too, which is really exciting. As coaches, we have also been involved in the group placement and helping to get teachers and students grouped. With our group placement, we've also done a lot of different things, like making name tags to help with getting transitions to be smoother, and creating. Shelley and Jody worked and made these amazing tubs that teachers could have, especially for some of those the support staff that were being leaders in this too, and not having a classroom. We were able to provide them with resources that they could carry with them to their reading mastery location. And so that they would have everything that they would need, that they might not necessarily have on hand, not having having an office rather than a traditional place. So we also did a lot with teacher training, and that looked really different. As Heidi had mentioned, a vast majority of our teachers were able to do either the corrective reading or the reading mastery training. And they did that in the summer. In the fall, Shelley also did a great job of leading a training with some of our foster grandparents or some of the newer teachers that weren't here yet when we had that training, so that she was able to give them that in-person support, which was really great. We also have, as I think Jody mentioned, some modules online that come with our program. And that's really great to be able to go back and reference. For example, there's a great tool in those modules that will pronounce the sounds so that teachers can understand what those sounds or those phonemes are supposed to be like, so that they can model those correctly for their students. And that's really exciting. We also have been working on making sure that we give our teachers different resources through email, like little tips and tricks and things that we might have noticed through observations that teachers could, build on, or that we can provide support. And we try to, communicate and give, little training emails as we go to, just to help. Now that we're getting familiar with things, how can we take this to the next level and everything? And as coaches, we continue to support as well through things like modeling. That's something that I really enjoy, going into a group and getting to walk through parts of a lesson that maybe the leader has requested. And then later we can have that conversation of, what are some of those best practices? What are we seeing that you can take now and you can use with your group? That's been really great. We also have a huge team of administrators and us coaches that will go in and observe and provide feedback. That we look for different things, like for the fidelity of the program, such as engagement, sticking to the script, so that we can just make sure we're seeing and knowing how our team is doing, so that we can really support them where they need that. And then with that comes those feedback cycles, which are so important to be able to say, here's things that I'm noticing you're doing well. What are some things that you feel like you want to work on? And just being able to have those conversations to really enhance the teacher's skills, which then is going to help our readers to become even better readers. So it has been super exciting to get to be a part of this program and getting to do this work with and for our students.
I think the only thing I would add before we go to the next slide would be that we were able to implement one building before the other. And so in doing that, that also gave us, again, a way to get better and improve as we were doing it. And so in some ways, we've had 3 starts to this, and that was a exciting part. And so thanks for letting us step in and kind of catch that up where Brenda had to step out. And we'll jump into, I think did we already cover, we're adjusting the groups. I believe we mentioned that, and the curriculum calls for that as you're getting to certain points, reassess, look at the data, look at the assessment pieces. And so as was mentioned, these little reading groups are becoming teams, and the kids are excited and they're in my group. And even today, as I was in the lunchroom, I heard kids saying, hey, they're in my group. And no, they're my friend from Reading Mastery. And so that was super exciting to see that piece of the puzzle as well. And so as they get to know each other in the groups, my office space is used and shared with a group, and on occasion I'm in there. And at some points I hear the kids helping each other in the groups and doing really good positive interactions with sounding it out. Instead of just saying the word, they're helping the kids, each other, sound out the words. And we see that coming into our other pieces of the curriculum outside of Reading Mastery in all of the grade levels where we're using our reading interventions. So that was our Reading Mastery. And now we're going to jump into our rewards program, which is our secondary reading intervention. And so again, this is something that has been started and we're improving. And rewards has been done for a few years in the Muskegon Heights system. And so it was somewhat familiar, but we've also have a lot of different staff. And so the training was significant. And last year it was done online with COVID virtual learning. And so that has been a learning curve, again, for the teachers with the curriculum and how that works. And again, they have that knowledge base that's very different because of our letters training. And so high school staff went through that as well. And coming from a high school secondary experience as a teacher, teaching sounds wasn't something that was a part of my training as an English teacher in that same way as it would have been for an elementary teacher. And so I think our secondary teachers had such a big learning curve with that curriculum. And then to step into this rewards program. So if you can go to the next slide, rewards is a program that works with decoding. And so that purpose of that is just to really lean into that focus on prefixes and suffixes of the words, and then the vowel sounds. And so like our Reading Mastery program, where about 85% of the curriculum, the sounds, the words are repeated in every lesson, the rewards program repeats the suffixes and prefixes in a variety of formats, so that they're learning that, and they're learning those vowel sounds. When we decode words, our brain, from our letters training, we know that it's picking up the beginning, the ending, and that middle piece, which are vowels. And so that's how our processing works when we get to know those sounds well. And so 80% of our English language is multisyllabic words. So you have those various words, and our kids, when we did our pre-testing with the students as we were going through this, every teacher found that the kids were getting the prefix and maybe the second syllable of the word. But when it got to 3 syllables or 4 syllables, they were missing the suffix. They were just making up whatever word their brain pulled out of familiarity, rather than sounding it out and decoding it properly. And so I think that was an aha moment in our pre-testing as we were going through with this. And Tyler will talk maybe a little bit more about that as we go. We use our advisory about 30 minutes as a space for rewards. Every student who is not at benchmark is in a rewards group, and our grouping is pretty sporadic right now. We didn't have the pre-testing done when we were scheduling, and so we're in the process, as we're entering the second marking period, of regrouping the students based on our pre-testing data and some of our other testing for reading, that we can align the students a little bit better based on those benchmarks and based on those scores, so our reading levels, and that allows our groups to focus where they're needed. The curriculum is divided into two different sections. One, the first 13 lessons, it's a 20 lesson curriculum, and it takes a couple days, usually about 2 days, once they get the pacing of the lesson and the kids get the familiarity of it. We have all types of challenges with our groups, and sizing and balancing, and after lunch or before lunch, and some of those settings and dynamics that take place as well. We pay attention to the observations of the fidelity or the direct instruction. It's a direct instruction program, and so that's a big part of it, as well as learning and what that learning curve looks like. And so I just want to show you a quick clip of this is a lesson, and we'll let that slide come up, and barring any tech issues, we'll just play that for a little bit so you can get an idea of the back and forth that takes place. This was a slide video that was shown during COVID learning, and so the responses we won't hear from the students, but you'll get a feel for what that curriculum looks like. So go ahead and play that.
Lesson 2, Activity A. Open your student book to Lesson 2, page 7. Listen, I'm going to say the parts of a word. You're going to say the whole word. Incomplete. What word?
Incomplete.
That's right, incomplete. I'll say the parts, you say the word. Listen. Correspond. What word?
Correspond.
That's right, correspond. Reconsider. What word?
Reconsider.
Complication. What word?
Complication.
Incapable. What word?
We'll stop there. But
Yeah.
that is a great, that's a great introduction to kind of how the curriculum works. It's a back and forth, and Mr. Harmon in this case had really good pacing. Of course, it was video driven and designed that way, but those were, it gives you a feel for how that piece works. And in this introductory lesson, this was lesson 2, so they're still learning routines. It really was about decoding, and they're not looking, they see the word, and this particular exercise, it's just repeating and getting used to those different parts of the puzzle. And so that was a piece of that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And in this, we'll see just some reflections. Our principal, Ms. Patton, wasn't able to be here this afternoon, but and the teachers' names are listed there, and the scores that they have, and just kind of the averages scores for pre-testing, we'll do post-testing at 2 other points in the school year. And then we also did the San Diego assessment for reading levels, and just got some feedback that way. And what we saw as teachers, Ms. Patton and I both came alongside teachers and helped get that work done in those areas. And what we saw is the students' scores actually seem to be higher than their benchmark state assessment scores, because what we're guessing, we'll see how that goes, but our hypothesis is that the kids in our building tend to respond relationally, and being in that smaller setting, where we're one-on-one with them when we were giving these tests really made a difference in the feedback that we could give them. I know that the students that I tested, I was able to say, hey, you did a great job, but do you know what? Rewards is going to offer you the opportunity. You missed the endings of the words, but you're going to learn that in this time and in our rewards program. And I actually tested a lot of my kids in the library, and we had talked earlier about our Reading Rocks program and giving books and building home libraries. And so I was able to say, here's 3 or 4 different books that are in this reading level. And they were excited to take a book home. And so that was kind of a side benefit. But certainly those conversations that we're able to have with the students when we're doing these, I think as teachers, we miss those a lot because it's busy all the time. And that was a unique opportunity that this program offered as well. And so the teachers are attempting to work through the lessons. It's a learning curve for them. These first couple weeks that we've implemented this at the high school for this semester has been back and forth with testing. Again, we're regrouping students after our Thanksgiving break. And we noticed that the students, we're able to pull some of the students in, especially those that are in a kind of the middle of the road group right now, because I think our students that are struggling with reading, rewards works for students that are above a 3rd grade reading level. And we do have some students that are low. And I think that behavior piece, and Tyler will talk about that a little bit too, just that is a challenge for them when they're in the a group setting that's not everybody kind of on that same page. So that's a learning curve that we have as well. We need to, Ms. Patton reflected that our PD working through the assessment and the collection of data, you can see that we have a teacher that just inputted it wrong. I know she did the data collection, but what does that look like? And helping them determine, well, how is it good or bad that they're at this point? And what does that look like? So we need to do some more professional development and coming alongside them as we coach them through that program, as we train them in what rewards looks like. In the past, we've had success with this. And when the program is implemented with fidelity, we've had that opportunity. Another thing that I'll mention that through our letters training that Heidi talked about earlier, we were fortunate to have a rewards trainer as also our letters webinar trainer. And so when he was going through and giving information to us about letters and that knowledge base and the exercises he brought in, he used exercises directly out of the rewards program because he knew we were also preparing to implement that. And so that just gave our teachers another boost that here's some reasons why this is helpful and how this head knowledge that we're getting out of letters is going to directly apply into the curriculum that we're using. So I'll let Tyler give some reflections from the teacher perspective.
Alrighty, so hi guys, my name is Tyler. I am the social studies teacher here at Muskegon Heights, and this has been my 3rd year doing rewards, but it has been kind of crazy this year to start because we were online virtually all last year, and that's a whole year not seeing the students in person, and it's a whole year of them trying to get back into what we're doing right now. So behaviorally and just kind of trying to have, because I have the seniors this year, so trying to have the seniors take something seriously that's like reading when they feel like they all know how to read and they are kind of set in their ways per se with reading. It's been a challenge in that way, but I feel like we're getting somewhere with the structure here, and I feel like the rewards program is really straightforward and helping the teachers just feel confident in doing a good job at implementing it and getting the students to interact and try to get better at reading. Mm-hmm. So like I said, I work with the seniors. So the students are all over the place in terms of like their reading level and the pretest and the scores that I've got. So as we keep going and we get further into this, we can place the students where they should be at. But that makes it difficult in class when I'm implementing this and we're doing, back and forth, just with the whole class and doing this. So, some kids are further ahead and some kids are a little bit behind. So I found that rewards works best if the students get it, and the students get the most out of it if I meet them where they're at. So I spend a lot of time doing one-on-one with students, or putting them somewhat in groups where, because a lot of the friends have the same level, and it kind of works that way, and that helps me out a little bit. But just in the days and some of the off time, I spend more time working with students to catch them up, and they know where they're at, and they kind of, they're kind of shy about it, and they won't come straight forward and let you know that they're a little bit behind. So, I feel like I'm doing a good job in that. We only have like 27 minutes, but in the downtime, I catch up some kids to help them get back to where they should be. And so I feel like that's been going good with the one-on-one time, and that works the best for me. And then also going through parts of the lesson and letting some of the students work on their own. So like I said, you watch the video, and when we implement this, there's a lot of back and forth with the students, and just slowing it down and showing the students to take their time while reading a word and breaking the word down into parts, and not just trying to get through as fast as you can and making up the ending, because that's been a big problem that I've been seeing. That's been helping a lot, and just trying to make them, because I'm a competitive guy, I'm trying to help them compete with themselves, and just when they're trying like their scores, just try to help them improve and to slow down and to just get the word right. That's been kind of the way I've been going with it. And like I said, just focus on yourself and keep a learning mindset. Because I say they're seniors, I say, I'm 27 years old, and I tell them that I've been learning a lot with them and breaking down the prefixes and suffixes. I'm a social studies guy, and I need to know this. And like I said, it's been helping me out as well. So just to be humble, and to just, we're in school, take this seriously and try to learn and take from it what we can, has been my biggest thing. Like I said at the end here, just express to the students that there's something to get out of this, right? They feel like they're, little kids, and I feel like they're in elementary school, but I just say, listen, this will help us, and to trust me. And like, that's where that relationships we have with the kids comes into play a lot, because if they trust you and you can let them know that this is not for no reason, this is important, they take it seriously. So that's what I got with that. So it's been going good, and we're going to continue to keep growing and getting better, and myself included, because we all have a lot of room to grow. So yep.
Thanks, Ty. Just a couple quick things that I would say on the next slide, just some of the next. Again, we're regrouping. I think all of us wish that we would have had the pre-test and all those things done ahead of time. And just with the virtual learning aspect of last spring, that wasn't possible coming into the school year. And we wish that we could have done more teacher practice sessions and used each other as students, and kind of gone through and just worked on some of those formats ahead of time. But we're getting better at it all the time. And I think that's where we'll start to see the motivation of the teachers. We've already seen that change just with the pre-testing results. And now once we can get the students grouped accordingly, I think that'll be even better. Our 7th through 8th grade students use this as well. Our academy is 7 through 12. And so our 7th and 8th grade students, they buy into it a little bit easier than our high school students, who, again, like Tyler said, they think they know how to read, and sounding out words and going back to breaking it down into syllables. Seems a little bit elementary to them, but they're starting to pick up a little bit. And so we're excited for those next few weeks as we go forward. So that's a little bit about our secondary reading intervention that we've done for our literacy focus this year.
So thank you, Tyler and Shelley, for taking us through the secondary rewards program. Heidi, Jen, and I want to talk a little bit about the final component of our expert literacy plan, which involves a Cultivating Genius book study. And Dr. Thompson referenced our Adinkra symbols at the start of our presentation today. And it's important to note this one, because this one is kind of a big deal for us. It's about learning from the past, and it's supporting our children currently and into the future. So it's been really amazing to be able to forge a partnership with Dr. Goldie Muhammad. And if you're not familiar with her book, on the next slide, there is a little snapshot of her book. It's called Cultivating Genius. Personally, sometimes you have things come along in your life from a learning perspective, and it's really, it's life-changing. And this one was one of those for me personally. She presents this historically responsive literacy framework from an equity lens. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit more about that, the history or the historical connections to the framework that she has built. So in her framework, she has 5 what are called literacy pursuits. So I'm going to hand it over to Jen Bauman to talk us through those, to remind us of those literacy pursuits and how they connect to our goals.
All right, with the this Cultivating Genius book, there is so much information in this book. And one of the things that we really want to focus on this year is her, we were talking about the 5 literary pursuits. On here, it does show 6, but we kind of added the call to action in there. So first of all, we've got identity, and we want to make sure that the students see themselves in their learning. So this is why we have a focus on literature that is not what you would see in a, maybe in a different school system. We also are working on the students' skills, students and teachers' skills with the letters, reading mastery, and our rewards and corrective reading. And the skills are basically, just like what would you know about the content area, just what you would normally learn in school about a subject. And with the intellect, this is where we are falling in with the Cultivating Genius, because this is intellect is what we learn or understand about different topics, concepts, and paradigms. And so this is where where we connect the intellect to action. So intellect and call to action are connected together. And then we've got criticality, and we want to make sure that with this, we are trying to think, how will the instruction help to engage students thinking about power and equity and the disruption of oppression. So this criticality enables us to question both the world and texts within it to better understand the truth in history, power, and equity. And finally, with joy, we just want to make school a joyful place. I know a lot of times, you see students when you walk down the hallway, everything's silent. Kids are walking in straight lines. This is has been real big focus in the past in the elementary schools, and now we want to focus on joy. There really is no reason why students can't be talking quietly amongst themselves on their way to lunch, or if they happen to be walking next to each other when they're walking down from lunch, or instead of a straight line, that's okay too. All right, I apologize. I'm working the screen and presenting right now, so I've got a couple different screens going, and so I've talked a little bit about identity, and so as I said, it's composed of notions of who we are, who others say we are, and whom we desire to be. And so we really focused on Black as a Rainbow color last school year. All of the students, families in the district received a copy of the book, Black as a Rainbow color. And this year, our focus is going to be on the undefeated. So again, students will see themselves in the literature.
The next literary pursuit is skills, as we talked about before. Goldie Muhammad defines this as competence, ability, and expertise based on what educators deem to be important for student learning in each content area, and who develops the skills matters. And this is the sample, again, of what we've been doing as adult learners and the curriculum that we are presenting and we are using with our children.
All right, so with intellect, it's the understanding, enhancement, and exercising of mental powers that all want to better understand and critique the world. And so we're really focusing on the teachings of Ladson Billings, Dr. Muhammad, and Paulo Freire with his liberatory education. And with Ladson Billings, it's the culturally relevant pedagogy.
Criticality is the next literary pursuit, which Goldie Muhammad defines as the capacity to read, write, and think in ways of understanding power, privilege, social justice, or oppression, and particularly for populations who have been historically marginalized throughout the world. We are working toward this. This is a big component of why we are learning to read. It's so that we can become critical readers and thinkers.
And then our call to action, which is opportunities to stand up, speak up, make principled decisions, and carry out collective action against bias, exclusion, injustice, and prejudice. And again, this is something we are in progress with, and it's tied to the intellect that our teachers and students are working on.
And finally, joy is one of our ultimate goals for our learning. And this is the opportunity to advance students' happiness by elevating beautiful and truthful images, representations, and narratives of self and others. So that gives you a little bit of behind the scenes of what the literary pursuits are. We're going to turn it over to Heidi to talk us through what's next. So Jen, we've got 2 slides ahead for Heidi.
All right, so what's next for cultivating genius? As we use this book to guide our work, right? We start by asking ourselves these critical questions. When the curriculum text provided by the school is not enough, how will I respond as a critical and equitable educator? Critical and equitable. How will this text advance my students' learning of their identity of themselves or of other people's cultures? Is it a mirror or is it a window? How will this text advance my students' learning of the skills they need? How will this text advance my students' intellects? Is this text thought more than skills deeping into intellect? And how will this text advance my students' criticality? How does the text respond to the social times of the society? So we keep these in mind as we are choosing materials and curriculum for our students. And to take us home is going to be Dr. Thompson coming up with our overall what's next. While we wait for her to join us on stage, we just need to show you again, there's another symbol grounding us in our work, right? The Edrinka symbol of independence, freedom, and emancipation.
Awesome. Thank you, Heidi. What a team, right? You see why I come to work every day. It's the second reason why I come. The first reason are our students, because I hope you hear all this passion, all this excitement. And this is what we're bringing to our students because we want them to be passionate and excited and have joy of learning. And we think we can get them there through this legacy process. So what's next for us? We're going to embark on early childhood oral language instruction, elementary handwriting instruction, adolescent, young adult comprehensive reading instruction. And again, this is one of our books that we plan to just deeply dive into with not only the rest of our staff and students, but our community as well. And we've done a lot, but we have a lot more to do. And we knew that this was going to be some tough work. We knew it wasn't going to be a sprint, but a marathon. And so we're trudging up the hill because we know once we hit that peak and we go down that other side, all of our students are going to be expert readers. And our whole goal for this pursuit is that we want to make students, or we want to allow students to see the joy in reading. So we thank you again for giving us the opportunity to share a little bit about Muskegon Heights Public School Academy system and to experience some of the passion and excitement that we have heard and seen through this direct, explicit learning in our reading programs. I know there's very little time, but if anyone has any questions, you can hit on that QR code and you will have contact information from us for us, and we will entertain any questions that you have concerning our presentation.